Today's episode is brought to you in part by Amazon. Everyone loves the convenience of shopping from home. Amazon helps you do just that. Shopping for new computer components, the best gaming peripherals, or even pre-built PCs, there are always new and interesting finds on Amazon. Right now, you can get free 2-day shipping with a free trial of Amazon Prime that you can cancel anytime. I got Amazon Prime. It's pretty awesome. Plus, you can help support Defense of the Patients by visiting defenseofthepatients.com and clicking through the Amazon banner on our website. Just click the banner and do your shopping. No additional charge to you, and Amazon provides support to Defense of the Patients just for telling them we sent you. So remember, before you shop Amazon, visit defenseofthepatients.com and click on the Amazon banner on our website to support the show at zero additional cost to you. Thanks, guys. Now here's the show. All right, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the DotPro with BreakyCPK. I am BreakyCPK, of course, and once again, excited to be here for another, what's been a great week of Dota 2 news. Definitely a lot to talk about this week, no doubt, including all the roster updates that we have, and there's been quite a couple of interesting ones, to say the least, so we're going to be getting into that later on in the show. But, of course, there's events that are now starting to take place post 7.06. Most recently, Starladder, which obviously we'll get into later. And then the Manilla Masters, in fact, as of this recording, has currently just started. And it's going to be heading into day number 2 coming up right here. But definitely plenty to talk about as far as also some unfortunate news over the Chinese region with Dota 2. Some drama is continuing over there. We kind of touched on it a little bit last week. We'll have a couple of more updates here in this show as well concerning that. And then later on, I'm also going to be going over rankings of the upcoming lands that are currently taking place. Really rankings of the lands that are post-Kiev, so including Starladder, and then all the way until we expect the TI invites to come out. So we're going to talk about that later on and kind of give our personal list of what we think are the most significant lands for teams that are looking to get one of those invite spots. We don't really know how many, of course, as last year I believe it was 6, if I'm not mistaken. But they've shown that they can, they may change it up. So that'll be interesting, and obviously plenty more to talk about throughout the following weeks on that subject as well. But also going to be joined by a couple of guests on this show as always, and actually really excited for all these guests here today. We're going to be joined initially here shortly by KotLGuy, also known as Dakota. He's going to talk about the Starladder event that took place. Of course, he was casting at the event, so going to get his special insight from it. We're also going to be joined by Trent Pax, who is actually at the upcoming Manila LAN, or currently going on Manila LAN, so getting some insight there as well. And then we're also going to be joined by Cinderin, the one, the only Cinderin, as he's going to talk about his new team, Crescendo, that was actually just created very recently here. One of the many roster situations that we plan to talk about later on in the show. So really excited for this one, but as usual, want to start with our first segment right here, what I like to call the good, the bad, and the ugly. So getting into it, we got the good. Starladder. Starladder was good. Starladder, first LAN of 7.06. No doubt was a very successful event, to say the least. Now, I'm going to be upfront with you guys. I personally didn't get the chance to watch most of it. I unfortunately was out of town without internet access. I actually, my family, my wife's family more so, but is my family too, that I married into, of course. They actually own a cabin up north. It's about a 4-hour drive from where I am, and every summer we make a point to go to it multiple times, but it's a great time, and it's a great getaway. The one downside is there's no internet access, so happened to be this last weekend. I was actually up there. Now, I say a downside. It's actually nice for that, to be honest, but it does mean if events like this are going on, I happen to be up there, then I unfortunately am missing out. So, again, that disclosure off the bat right here, I didn't necessarily get to watch most of the event. I did go back and at least look over some stats and watch a little bit, and obviously, I do plan to have KotLGuy on here, as I mentioned. or Dakota even, to talk about the Starladder event a little more in depth. But just from my initial reactions, just from what I could see, I mean, it ended up being a great event overall from what I've heard across the board too. In case you didn't know, Team Liquid actually defeated TNC 3-2 in the best of 5 grand finals to take the title. So Liquid, the first official team to take the title of post 7.06 and really post Kiev, which obviously again is really important here because now teams are playing for TI. Teams are playing for that TI spot, TI invite spot specifically, and Liquid is off to a great start. Now, personally, I don't know if this is enough for Liquid to be like, they finished 5th, 8th in the Kiev Major. They got to the second round, ultimately knocked out, I believe, by Invictus Gaming. So, obviously one of the more tournament favorites there. So they had a decent run at Kiev. And then on top of that, now winning the first LAN post Kiev. It definitely has to mean something. I don't think it is enough to guarantee them a spot by any means, but I do think it definitely puts their name in the conversation, and we'll see how they continue to do moving forward here. I know they're in several of the upcoming lands as well. They're not at Manilla Masters, of course, but they are at a couple of other upcoming lands that, again, it's going to depend how they do. And later on shows, I plan to, do my rankings once again and kind of, give my thoughts on who I think is going to be maybe one of those deserving invite teams. Perhaps next show, actually, we'll start updating on that. I think may make sense with a couple lands out of the way at that point. But again, going back to this, though, Liquid winning it 3-2 in the end over TNC. TNC on the other side of it, by the way, of course, TNC, again, one of these mini roster situations. We did talk about this last week. 1437 actually joined TNC going into this event as the new captain of the team, even playing that support role. And apparently he was even joking about like going into it where he had only played like 2 games or something like that with the team going into this event here. So to say the least, it would have been understandable if they maybe didn't have the best synergy. Well, they did. They looked very good right off the bat. They did not drop a single game until the grand finals, actually. They went 2-0 undefeated in the group stages. They beat both IG 2-0 as well as Alliance 2-0. And then they beat Newbie 2-0 on top of that in the playoff stage before eventually running into Liquid again. And they went back and forth with Liquid. It was a back and forth series. First game for Liquid, second for TNC, third for Liquid, fourth for TNC, and then in the fifth and final, of course, going in favor of Team Liquid right there. But yeah, TNC, another team that's, definitely going to be contesting for an invite spot possibly. And, with a second place finish here, and depending how they do moving forward, kind of the same boat of going to be interesting to see if they can do enough to earn said invite. But still a lot more to come before we get, again, too much into that. But another thing with this tournament, though, obviously, was the 7.06 patch, the first LAN mentioned. And we definitely got to see quite a bit of that at it, including probably the most prevalent one was Jakiro. Jakiro was actually the second most picked hero, including right off the bat by TNC. 1437 made a point to draft it, and it proved to do work. So Jakiro's definitely a hero that we could perhaps expect to see more of in 7.06 when it comes to the competitive mindset as far as these tournaments here. So not to overreact with the first official event. Again, the patch wasn't even out a week when this event really started right here, so you can't get too caught up in what was happening. But again, to say the least, it got us some information, and we have a little bit better of an idea now of maybe what to expect moving forward here when it comes to the 7.06 patch and playing some tournaments. So that's the good. Now the bad. Staying along the Starladder lines here, Sand King actually was the most picked hero at the event, and he happened to have the worst win percentage out of a top 10 hero at the event on top of that. In fact, he only had a 37% win percentage. Out of 16 games he was played, he only won 6 of them. Went a 6-10 record. Now, again, on paper, that may not necessarily sound like horrible. 6-10 is not like god-awful, but for being the most picked hero, I feel like he would have maybe had it. Being the most picked, you usually expected, if anything, to be around that 50%, right? You expect it to be 8-8, around the 50%. Now, again, I know this wasn't the most matches right here, but I do find it a little bit humorous whenever I see a stat like that, where the most picked hero happens to be a pretty poor win percentage. It kind of maybe tells you something that, all right, maybe people are overvaluing such hero. And Sand King, with the off lane nerfs on top of it, it feels like the more just kind of tanky offlaners are becoming a lot more relevant now. Tidehunter especially comes to mind. We did see a little bit of Tidehunter at this event, and been seeing some Tidehunter on some online events as well being picked up here. Definitely one I'm excited, actually, that we are seeing. So, yeah, Sand King would have to fill the bad as far as this segment goes. And then, okay, so now the ugly. Well, this is it's getting pretty ugly, man. And I'm referring to a couple of things, actually, bans that have been happening lately. Now I'm not talking about bans on heroes. I'm talking about bans on teams. There's a couple of bans that were announced here very recently, in actually a couple of different regions. We'll start with the Ace situation. So we touched on this a little bit last week. So Ace is this overseeing organization within the Dota 2 Chinese community, basically made up of all the top teams. You know, your teams like LGD, Invictus Gaming, Newbie, etc. All your top teams from China are basically involved in this organization. It's pretty much, if you want to compete in Chinese Dota, as far as all their official events, we've mentioned the idea of the DPL before here on this broadcast. That's all run under this ACE organization. And if you want to compete in it, you have to be part of it, basically. And with that said, you have to be on their good side. Now, to say the least, there's been some situations. Obviously, the X-Wings team, we talked about it again last week a little bit. A couple of more updates on that. So, with the X-Wing situation, we had basically, they officially announced the ban on the X-Wings players. Ace did a couple of weeks ago, about a week and a half ago or so, making a point that, so pretty much the X-Wings players, they left their team initially going into the Kiev Major. I guess there was some contract disputes. They made the points that they weren't getting paid out in time, and they just simply decided to just leave. They decided to, not even worry about the contracts that they had on hand. Just say, screw it, we're just going to be done with this organization, and they just simply got up and left. And so that's why they were known as Team Random going to Kiev. Now, post-Kiev, we found out some more information on it. Again, we found out initially that the players were announced themselves that they were going to be retiring from competitive Dota 2, but it was clear that something just didn't feel right. When the defending TI champions announced that they're quote-unquote retiring, something has to be going on, just to essentially give up an opportunity to go to TI7 for free, because as the defending champions, they were going to get an invite spot. Even though they haven't had the most success throughout the year post their TI6, the defending champions always get that spot, right? In fact, this is going to be the first time now, as we've talked about, where we're not going to have a defending champion at TI7 here. So that's going to be interesting in itself. But then we found out a couple of days later that, okay, well, maybe we're not retired, we still want to play. But Ace actually had then announced that they banned all of the X-Wings players from participating on any of the teams and any of their events. This specifically affected a couple of players. Let me bring them up real quickly. Yeah, Faith Beyond and Y. Now, Faith Beyond and Y, they were apparently in talks with eHome, one of these other organizations, obviously, in the Chinese Dota 2 scene, a very, very relevant one that has a lot of history. You can argue one of the most significant ones, even. They actually were in talks, apparently trying to join eHome, but Ace having banned the players, that wasn't going to happen, right? Well, eHome apparently then tried to, I guess, get the discussion going of, well, can we at least have these players on ban? No, we want them for our team. Y and Faith Beyond, apparently they were making the points like, this whole leaving the Wings team was never our idea. We didn't actually want to do it. We just kind of did what the other players wanted to do. They basically threw their former teammates, under the bus to an extent. Whether that's true or not, we'll probably never know, obviously. But it now brought up this situation where not only was this ban happening on the X-Wings players, and then on top of that, the retirement announcements, but then on top of all of that, now we have some internal drama from the players themselves, basically, like I said, throwing teammates under the bus, suggesting that, what they're saying isn't true, and now they're having back and forth feuds that have been going on. Now, this goes back to eHome, again, though, trying to talk with Ace and trying to actually pick up why and Faith Beyond. They actually ended up signing them, apparently, to their roster officially. They just ended up just doing it, not really caring about the quote-unquote ban that Ace had put on the players. As a result of this, Ace banned eHome. Yes, that just happened. Ace banned eHome from competing in Ace-sanctioned events. So now it's even going a step further. They're not only banned the X-Wings players, but now they're banning eHome as the organization because they picked up these quote-unquote tainted players that Ace sees in their eyes. This all comes from the idea. Now, again, there's a big picture here. I really don't want to spend too much time on this because, frankly, I'm not the expert on this subject, and I hopefully want to be able to get somebody on that can explain this a lot better. I know I'm maybe sound a little all over the place here, but hopefully I can get an expert on to kind of explain this whole situation. But, again, it's clear that it's still going, right? But really what we're at here is, which side are you on? And, well, it's understandable the community has completely backed the side of X-Wings players, really, for the most part. Now, there is the very fine line here that why Ace is doing what they're doing, as much as you may disagree with them being this controlling organization in Chinese Dota 2, which I'll admit off the bat, I mean, I definitely disagree with it. I think it's ridiculous and very unhealthy for the scene, the way they're doing it, especially. However, the good that does come of it is this organization. You know, as I've said, the idea of this DPL league, things like that. This organization as a unity of all these teams kind of working together to put on such a scene does have its benefits. And ideally, one of the better ones, too, is the idea of contracts and the idea of player salaries and whatnot. So when the X-Wings players just decided that they did not want to follow the contracts anymore, they basically just said, screw these contracts, we're leaving. From Ace's perspective, they want to make sure that this isn't something that continues amongst other players. So they had to make, in their minds, they had to make a very aggressive statement that we have to ban them, because if we don't, we're almost suggesting to our teams and other players that they could do the same if they wanted to. And I do, there is a part of me that understands that, right? There is a part of me that, obviously, and especially what I've called this many times of esports in general, this wild, wild west era, having these contracts does create at least a bit of organization, at least some sense of unification with the players and the teams. But now, to be fair, obviously, there's the counter argument again of, well, X-Wings, if they weren't actually getting the other side of the contract fulfilled from the ownership of X, why they left was why they made the point where they weren't getting paid or whatever, then of course they have a dispute there. But there are avenues you could take rather than just straight up leaving the team and just say, we're not going to worry about the contract anymore, such as a legal system. Now, again, I'm not going to sit here and say that would have worked. I'm not going to pretend like I'm a legal expert. I'm not going to pretend like I know all the ins and out of the Chinese Dota scene, especially. But there is the part of maybe the X-Wings players were a little too hasty to react the way they did to such situation, which has now caused this snowball effect. It caused the reaction of Ace, which, from their perspective, again, it makes sense why they did what they did, but now it's just causing even more of a snowball. Now, the one good that could ultimately, and hopefully may come out of this, is that this Ace organization either is going to be revamped of sorts to maybe be a little bit more friendlier to the players themselves, or it's going to be abolished completely. Now, I don't think the idea of it being abolished completely is necessarily something that's going to happen. It sounds like it's, it has quite the footprint in the Chinese Dota scene, and we're talking about some very powerful people over there, some very wealthy people. All these owners of said organizations are basically on top. So we'll see how things continue to play out, I think is the best way to put it. And whether or not Valve is or already has stepped in, frankly. And that's the other side of it too, right? Where you got to wonder what Valve is thinking about all of this. And no doubt they're having their opinions, and Valve has definitely made a point for the longest time that they do what they do for the players. Like, the players come first when it comes to running all these tournaments, when it comes to putting on set events, and they frankly have done a great job of that. So you have to think they can't like what's going on when it comes to Ace doing what they're doing, and there has to be a point where eventually they're going to get involved and try to really kind of be the ones to lay down the hammer and suggest, all right, here's the deal. This is our game after all. This is how things are going to be ran if you guys want to keep competing in our game. Again, that's the extreme, right? That's the ultimate. When this will happen, if it'll even happen, I can't say. I can't say for sure. But anyways, like I said, hopefully I can get an expert on here in the future to maybe break that down a little better and give better insight on the whole situation. But at least that should give you a general idea of what's been going on in the Chinese Dota scene, as we've kind of hinted at or talked about now these last couple of weeks right here. So now I mentioned when it came to the ugly, a couple of bans. There's actually one more I wanted to talk about. Not as much time, but NP, not Chinese Dota, NP, actually, they were just announced, or it was announced recently that they were banned from Dream League. All Dream League events throughout the next year. They were announced a 1-year ban. Now, this is coming off the back of them once again pulling out of a Dream League event. They did it last year, and now they did it again this year. Now, I want to actually clarify here real quickly. So I'm actually pulling it up. Give me a second, guys. But I wanted to, because I know that they pulled out last year as well. But I'm not sure if they did it. Yeah, so that they actually pulled out after the season had started. Yeah, they pulled out after the season had started, actually. And I think I remember talking about this. One of the main reasons why they pulled out was maybe because they weren't necessarily, they were at a point where they very likely weren't going to qualify anyways. And yes, it had to also do with other events maybe coming up, but that sucks, right? Like that's a shitty situation to put a league in, to be like, all right, well, we've lost our games here initially, so we just don't feel like on continuing. Now, that's where you can kind of blame the format to an extent, and obviously Dream League has tried to fix that, and they had that last season as well, where you get money based on every single game you win. So even if you don't have the chance of qualifying, you still have a chance to earn some money, which I think is definitely one of the best ways you could do it. But there should still be something on the teams and the players that, some sense of pride almost, that you can't just be using that as an excuse where, again, we're not going to qualify, so why should we even bother playing? Now, again, this is last season. So I was pretty frustrated when I saw the last season, but whatever. They didn't announce any bans or anything. Whatever. This season comes around. The North American or the American qualifiers were set to start next week here, actually. NP announced a couple of days ago, I want to say 2 or 3 days ago even, that they were actually pulling out of Dream League once again. Now, this time around, it's hard to be as annoyed by it. It's hard to be as frustrated towards NP about it, because they did give Dream League at least, a week and a half advance, if not close to 2 weeks. However, it still sucks, right? You committed to this event, and then to be pulling out little less than 2 weeks before the event actually happens, it now puts Dream League once again in a spot of, well, now we have to find yet another team that could perhaps look to play. They've already done their marketing, they've already made these graphic assets, they've already done all these things behind the scenes to get ready for this event, and yet you're pulling this change on them. Now, the reason why NP backed out this time around was actually they're going to be in Manila basically while these qualifiers start. So they're basically still going to be in Manila when these qualifiers start. So they made the point of, we're not going to bother trying to play from, all the way over here with insane lag. We're just going to go ahead and pull out and announce our or removal from the league here. If this was their first offense, I definitely don't see them being banned again. In fact, by the way, Digital Chaos actually is now replacing them, I had that wrong actually. SG Esports is now replacing them, excuse me. So now it brings in a South American team at least, which is kind of cool in its own right. But again, it goes back to this idea that I understand why Dream League did what they did, and NNP definitely deserved it. I'm glad that it was only the 1 year. I do think that it might have been extreme to be like permanent forever, especially considering at least they gave another like a couple weeks notice this time around. But that's just all Dream League can do. And now NP is not unable to participate in future Dream League events, which, does that really hurt them considering they've pulled out of the last two? Maybe not in the end, but what more can Dream League do? This goes, I had Milton on, who is actually one of the organizers of Dream League and DreamHack itself, and he kind of talked about that. It's tough. There's really no obvious answer on what they can do, and this is one of them. This is just one of the steps. So again, I don't think there's any hard feelings necessarily. It's not like they despise NP now, but it's a very warranted ban. Going back to the side of NP, I get why they did it, obviously, but it still doesn't look good on their resume, on their team profile here, as far as pulling out of the event, kind of last minute. So, is what it is, though, and thus they got the ban. Well, so that's the good, the bad, the ugly, guys. Definitely plenty to talk about, as mentioned, but we still got plenty more to talk about. And actually, going back to the Starladder, like I said earlier, we're going to be joined by Dakota, also known as KotLGuy. He was actually at the Starladder event, casting the event with Lacoste, actually. Had a lot of fun tuning into that. But we're going to get his insight and what he thought about the event and some fun things from it. Also, maybe preview a little bit the Summit 7 coming up. Of course, he's heavily involved with BTS there. So stay tuned, guys. We'll be back shortly after this break with Dakota. Okay, so now I'm excited to be joined by Dakota here. Dakota was actually at the Starladder iLeague Invitational that just took place here recently, of course, and happy to have him on to pretty much go over how the event went. Dakota, how's it going, man?
Breaky, I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for having me here, and I'm doing great.
Yeah, so you just got back here recently. It was quite the travel, I'm sure, all the way over to Shanghai. So you feeling recovered yet?
Yeah, I'm feeling pretty good. It's actually my third time now going to China, and the crazy thing is now whenever I go to China, I just think about how like 5 years ago, I never imagined I'd be in a kind of position where you're just walking around like in a suit in some nice hotel in China. You're just taking that moment to stop and like reflect on your life. But it's great. And the travel's pretty ridiculous. I had never experienced traveling like that normally. So 12 hours of being stuck in a plane when you're 6'3" is it's hell. It's a personal hell, but it's all worth it in the end. So I'm pretty recovered now. Took a day to adapt the full jet lag and feeling pretty good.
Well, so this happens to tie in because you were just in China, but before we get into the Starladder itself, what's going on with Chinese Dota, man? I'm sure you've heard about this Ace stuff as far as the bans going out. I mean, do you have any opinions? Have you really looked into much of it yourself?
I mean, we have Jack, of course. Jack is a very valuable, now he's turning into an extremely valuable almost community figure for Dota, and especially for a lot of the English readers and such, because he's become like almost a center figure for a lot of people and finding out all this new information. And he's really close, of course, with a lot of the teams in the Chinese scene. He's been actually out there for at least a couple of months now, because he works for also Beyond the Summit, and he helps us with any point of contacts with the Chinese scene or Ace, or when Summit rolls around, and we're reaching out to obviously get some Chinese teams to play in the qualifier. Like, these are the leagues that we have to contact with. And obviously from what everyone's been reading, things have been going pretty crazy. I haven't personally looked too much into the issue, because I'm always one of those guys that's like, I'd like to hear it from all sides. I don't want to, just read Reddit and go, let me get my pitchfork out and go crazy. But it does sound like things are incredibly hairy. It's very unfortunate because we all know Valve's motto is really all for the players, and they want the players to really be at the forefront and to enjoy the game and play the game. And you're hearing all these things about some of these leagues, and they, sometimes it seems like they're thinking about themselves first and putting the players second, and it's really unfortunate. So I'm trying not to put too much of my own personal opinion on it, but I would really hope that, I imagine people from Valve are kind of starting to investigate as far as what's actually going on, and we can only hope that something will be resolved so that everybody gets their chance to play. It would be unfortunate if now Team eHome, for example, that have stepped away from Ace are going to be excluded from everything else moving forward, or no other top-rated Chinese team is going to be able to play along with eHome. So very sticky. Hopefully this gets resolved, though.
Yeah, it's one of those, I do feel like there's still a lot more to come, as you're kind of getting at. So maybe we'll wait a little bit more and kind of see where it all ends up. But, hope for the best in the long run for sure. All right, but enough about that. We got the Starladder on a positive note here. Obviously, a great event. It ended up being yet another great grand finals, best of 5, going the distance there. What was it like being at Starladder, the LAN as a whole? I mean, I assume the event was great and you had a lot of fun there? Yeah,
I mean, firstly, we have to be extremely thankful that the Frog had blessed us with 7.06 going into the LAN, because, it would have been a great event, but now the event got a whole lot more interesting because obviously there is some serious changes to the game. The economy of the game's different. The laning, heroes have obviously been adjusted a bit, and everyone's going to be super excited to see what these top teams are going to be doing now. This is just, because Starladder is the beginning of what is going to be one of the more crazier Dota LAN seasons we've almost have ever seen. What is it now? 6 LANs in a month, if you include the Starladder that just occurred. 6 LANs. It's crazy. I could try to name them now, but it's quite ridiculous. We have Manilla Masters going on at the moment, and we have Epicenter, we have Dota Summit, we have Zotac, and we have now that Galactic event. I can't remember what it's called exactly. It's running the same dates as Dota Summit. So 6 events, all these teams trying to get in it, all these teams trying to do their best to maybe get that TI invite. So Starladder is like the first one out of the gate. So I was super, super excited to go there, and, got through the travel, got there. I was also super excited to be jumping into another casting opportunity to work with Lacoste, who I like a lot. I can go into like a whole nother spiel about just Lacoste himself. But, I obviously worked with him the first time before that at Dota Pit, and that was his first time even working a Dota LAN as a talent, as any sort of commentator analysis. He'd only been playing Dota up to that point, if that even. He'd even stepped away from the game since then. So suddenly this wild Croatian guy just shows up to Dota Pit, courtesy of David Parker, who's like, hey, this is Lacoste, former Dota pro. He's in the area, so he'll be joining us for Dota Pit. I'm just like, okay, I don't know who he is, but I'm excited to work with him. And I knew right away out of the first panel, this guy was silly. Something about him's a bit silly. And I warmed up to him real quick, and I knew that we were going to have a good connection. So one thing led to another. We ended up casting together. So knowing I was going to cast with Lacoste certainly helped get me excited about Starladder, because I feel like we have a good thing going. And he was going to need a lot more practice. I wanted to get back into casting hardcore again because I felt like I wasn't doing a lot. I was doing a lot more hosting for a while. So it was nice to be able to jump back in the caster seat once again and do it with Lacoste. Yeah, no, you guys are a great casting team, and Lacoste is definitely quite the treasure that's been found. So it's kind of cool to hear that story there from the beginning. I got the chance to talk with him actually while I was there at the BTS studio for the Kiev qualifiers, and I was not aware of that he comes from being a pretty significant player. He went to TI1, right, as a player? TI1 and TI2, and I call him he's like the Kevin Bacon of Dota. He seriously has played with everybody, he's played with EG, he's played with Demon. Suddenly he's in pictures with Loda. He's been with this guy, that guy. Oh, yeah, I was with him. We played on this team. Oh, I coached these guys. It's crazy the amount of connections this guy has. I don't know if he's been on these 1 week stints with everybody, or he's just sleeping with them or something. It's crazy. But he has all these great connections, and then he kind of just I don't want to be speaking too much for him, but he like disappeared out of the scene. Rumor has it the guy was boosting accounts for a while. I mean, he's like, he did some shady Dota stuff for a while, I guess, and then just kind of got captivated by the game once again, especially after Dota Pit. He just fell in love with it all over again. So it was great.
All right, enough about that guy. Let's go back to Starladder here. You mentioned at the beginning, you mentioned at the beginning there about 7.06, and of course that was one of the significant things about this land was that it happened to be the first land since 7.06, and let's be honest, it wasn't even out for that long, but feels like that's just a lot of what Dota is. You got to make adjustments as we've said in the past, going back to Hani, adapt or die is basically the mentality you have to live by. So. With that said, what really stood out to you about 7.06 that you really noticed at Starladder that you're like, oh, this is going to be fun?
Ooh, that's let me see. A couple things stood out. Obviously, like I said before, the value of the lanes and the laning phase felt like it went up by at least 3 or 4 fold. So a lot more value into drafting strong laners. A lot of Templar Assassin once again. A lot of people putting more value into that second Roche now. So maybe building heavy team fighters or teams in general that would really peak hard in the mid game. So we still get to see a lot of like Lycan and such, and then team fighters like Warlock. So that way, when it's second Roche time, they can take it up, have the Aegis, fight on forward, take down tier 2s. And if they win that team fight with an Aegis, they might be able to just flat out end the game right there. Which I like. I think spectators like, games that are very fast forward and, a lot of action-packed team fights. And it's not as hard anymore to be able to siege into the base. I felt like in the previous patch, with so many shrines, it felt like teams were able to be very resistant and very good at defending the high ground and just forcing games to go on a bit longer than they need to. So... That's not to say that 7.06 isn't a victim of long games. I had to cast like a 70-minute and an 80-minute game at this tournament, but they still felt intense, and I don't know. It felt like a warm welcome to a patch. It could be still very youthful eyes, and that teams are still learning and adapting, and that's why it feels so good. But it just felt like the game was moving forward, and there was a lot more action. Yeah, that's a good point you brought up at the end there, though. I do feel like you got to be a little careful. Seeing event again that it was out for a week, if that, as far as 7.06, and making reaction to it as far as like, oh, this is what we should expect to see now. People are trying things out, getting an idea of what the patch, but it's going to take some time before we get that meta once again. This is the most significant patch since 7.0, no doubt, since the Boston Major that we've had here. But there was a couple things that really stood out to me almost after the fact, even looking at the stats side of things here. Jakiro, wow, we saw him the second most popular hero, and then actually Tusk was played every single game by Liquid in the grand finals. I noticed that was something. Jakiro's really something interesting, because it's THC who just show up in like the very first series of the tournament, and Theben, or 1437, of course, new captain to this TNC squad. Talking to us even before going into the tournament, laughing a bit about how he's only had 2 practice games with the team before they start the tournament because he just moved out there. And there he goes. He just straight up drafts Jakiro in the very first game that we get to see in this tournament of 7.06. Like, who do you think you are? You're just going to show up in this meta and pull out Jakiro, who's never been a big deal in the previous patch. Well, I guess he just been happening to playing it in those couple of pubs and scrims beforehand, and it seemed to work, so they just go with it. And wouldn't you know it, he becomes the most popular hero in the freaking tournament. So it's crazy how that works out. Captain shows up, they have new, interesting ideas about the game, and suddenly other teams are taking note, and they realize the potential, and then they share it around, and the hero becomes quite special. So I guess, Jakiro's going to have a good place, similar how Ogre's going to have a place again. They're strong, durable, laning supports who can bully and move around the lane, so they're definitely back in action. And that same thing goes for Tusk, like you were talking about at the end there. And Liquid have amazing Tusk players, not just a player. You have both Kuro and GH who play it, so part of the reason why you also see Liquid in particular play it a lot, because you have that drafting advantage to pick him up early and then make it audible and switch up your second support if you'd like. But it's crazy to think that these teams are getting away with having these greedy bully supports that are sometimes even 2 melee bruising supports and still get away with just doing such a fantastic job.
Yeah. You brought up 1437 right there for TNC. Obviously, the team finished runner-up in the end, losing in a 3-2 in the grand finals there to Liquid. It's safe to say, with that result, a very good result for TNC as a team, and 1437 not even having much practice. So were you surprised how well he fit in as a player and a captain even?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, on one hand, you don't want to be too surprised because you know this guy is a seriously accomplished Dota player and captain. He's been on many teams. He's been playing the game since I'd started casting it, and who knows how long even before that. But to be able to do something like that, just show up and have 2 practice games and then take a team grand finals, I mean, that's crazy. It is crazy. It's also a testament to how talented these kids are. I hate to make myself sound so old and say they're just kids, but they just seem like wide-eyed Dota all-stars. And for the most part, that is even the same team that we saw at the previous TI, the same team that took down OG. So you also know that they're capable of being able to do that too. So it is a weird mixed feeling. You know that these players are all super, super good, and then they get someone like Theben and it still managed to work. It just gets me very excited. So, I mean, I think it was expected that they were going to do well. I think it would have been super crazy if they took down Liquid, but I would imagine that the next TNC event we see, they're going to be also getting up into that top 4 position at least.
Liquid, on the other side of it, winning the whole thing, as we mentioned here. You also talked about the idea of teams competing for that TI7 invite, which, of course, is very important over these next couple of months and these big lands that are happening right here. Do you think with this victory alone, that's enough to put Liquid in that invite spot, or are they going to need more results?
I would think so, and a lot of the panel at Starladder also agreed. Now that you think of 6 LAN events between now and TI, you really never know how many of those events Valve themselves are going to be factoring in. There's no structured rule set, all right, everybody, these are the events you have to attend if you want to be at this major or if you want to be at this TI. So it's, kind of up in the air, but Starladder's been around for a while. A lot of people also look at Summit. Manilla Masters has a big prize pool, and there's a ridiculous amount of high-profile teams there, so you have to factor that in as well. But overall, I would say that Liquid winning that does assure they're going to be in a great position to get an invite at TI. They already were looking pretty strong leading into it. What was it? They had at least a top 5 or 6 finish at Kiev, I want to say. So...
yeah, now you're putting me
I don't have
spot.
it up on my page. I had Starladder, good to go, of course. But this team was already looking like a powerhouse squad, and I think that them getting that grand final finish only kind of secures their TI invite for sure.
Yeah, they finished 5th, 8th, to clarify there.
I would think so. I mean, if they happen to be in the bottom 8 of this tournament, then I would say, I don't know. We'll have to see. They might need another event to prove themselves, but grand final finish, first place, I think it's only fair that they would definitely get an invite. But that's me. I'm not the frog.
Of course not. That we know of. No. Right. All right. You talked about Summit. Summit 7's coming up right here. Obviously, you're a big part of that, running with BTS there. It's always a fun event. And now there's this one last team that we need to figure out. What the Loopet Invitational currently going on right now. From what I'm looking at currently as we're recording this, all 8 teams are actually still in it. But, what is the idea behind this last this Loopet Invitational, having this kind of extra invitational at the end of it? Is this something that you guys have been doing for a while, or?
No, this is definitely something new, and it almost feels like now every Summit event, we're trying something new with the whole qualifying system, invite system. Summit has always been something that had a good special select of the best teams currently that have been invited to the event, and then we always, of course, have been hosting qualifiers to, get all teams internationally involved in our tournament. But as far as how many, spots are available to which qualifier and how we get an extra spot in has kind of changed through the years and through the different events. We had, a redemption vote back in the day when the Summit had access to being able to have an in-game compendium that people could vote through. There was that, I believe it was Summit 2 or IG got voted in. So obviously the Chinese scene had a lot of representation in game and were able to kind of get their boys in. It was a lot of fun. They dressed up as maids and everybody was getting involved in the voting system. And it was kind of cool, but similar to how Epicenter ended up, it was a pretty heavy-handed vote favor for IG. So it was something we had to look into again for the next event. And then as we know, unfortunately, in-game ticket / compendium support has kind of changed a lot since then. So doing those kind of votes or redemption votes also had to be changed up a lot. I think it was Summit 5 where we tried to bring back a voting system that FDL actually ended up getting in, and it wasn't really publicized that well, and we didn't think we did the best job possible with it. So it's something that's been ever changing. This go around, we have a deal or a partnership with LoopBet, and we have this great opportunity now to get another powerhouse European team involved. So they get to have their own like mini cup. So it gets, even more Dota games, even more action, and even more of seeing which is the best team to be able to make it to event. So I know there's a lot of great tier 2 and tier 1 teams, even some newer European squads that have just formed some new rosters that want to prove themselves. And we're just looking to see which last one of these ruthless teams is going to claim that final spot. So it's not to say that this is something that might happen at a future Dota Summit, but it's something we're trying out this time.
I want you to be honest, Dakota. If you could vote for one of these teams like you did in the past, these 8 teams here instead, which team would you vote for? Which team do you want to see?
Oh,
there?
The LoopBet team?
Yeah.
My Mouse Sports would be the first team that comes to my mind. I just say flat out. And that might be just me biased because we've had Mouse Sports / Adfinim at a previous summit, and I've worked with these guys before, and they just are a joy. They love the game. They love the opportunity of being there. They're always game for the content. They're game to be on the couch. That's just the first group that stands out to me. I know their performance and their performances recently hasn't shown that they really want to be here, but I hope that changes.
All right, it's rigged for Mouse Sports to win here first. So
all right, fair enough.
No. They're actually in the losers bracket again as we're recording this. So
come on, guys.
We'll see. It's gonna have to be a fight through the losers bracket right there. A tough run. All right, so yeah, that's gonna be fun. And yeah, the Summit 7 event itself, we still got this mid June here.
Yep, that's going to be June 14th through 18th. Okay. I'm really excited about this. I've loved the summit ever since I got to participate in the second one. I was just a spectator for the first one. And my role with Beyond the Summit has obviously changed a bit even since then. I've recently been stepping more into being a creative producer with Beyond the Summit. So I'm actually leading creative producer for this upcoming Dota Summit. Which means I'm a lot more hands-on with what happens on the show and everything that happens on the screen and the community outreach and all these things. And so I'm super excited about it. And I'm just being able to be more hands-on is going to be a great opportunity. I still will be able to be on the couch and cast a bit, but it probably won't be as much as we've seen in the past. But
always look forward to those in-between segments and pre-recorded stuff at the summit. So. Dakota, appreciate it as always. Thanks for joining me, man, and best of luck with the summit coming up here, and congrats on a successful Starladder event that just took place.
Breaky, thank you so much. I appreciate it, man.
All right, so great to hear from Dakota right there. Again, talking about the recent Starladder event, and it definitely was a good event, a good way to kick things off post-Kiev Major right there. But so a lot that's been going on here post-Kiev Major, not only 7.06, but of course the roster lock is coming up. And actually, a quick note on that real quickly, in case you haven't heard, the roster lock actually got postponed a couple of days. I'll talk about that a little bit later on, but before I did, I wanted to look to bring on my next guest here in just a minute. But my next guest happens to be the new captain of his newest team, Crescendo. We're looking at the newest roster to join the European competitive Dota 2 scene. We got Babyknight, Xcalibur, Cinderin, EGM, and Akke. That's right. Quite the roster right there. When you look across the board, a lot of experience, especially in that 3-4-5 position. And then, Xcalibur has always been a very sound mid player. He's that 9,000 plus MMR player that maybe hasn't necessarily broken through just yet as far as being a top tier talent on the competitive Dota 2 scene, but has most certainly had chances and is definitely still an up and coming player. And then Babyknight, of course, most recently with Cloud9 after that team kind of fell apart though, and he left that team. But he's going to be playing the 1 position actually with Crescendo here. What is the new name of our newest team? So. But again, going to be joined by Cinderin now to talk a lot more about Crescendo. First off, Cinderin, how's it going, man?
Good. I'm excited. basically. That's the short version.
You have reasons to be excited. You just announced your newest team here. Now, before we get into that, though, real quick, I want to actually go a little bit back with NIP and that situation. So, what do you mind talking about what happened there with NIP as far as the departure goes? Was it on equal footing? Did you guys agree for that? What was the deal with that?
It was basically, so we played, we had our boot camp for the Kiev major qualifier, and we didn't make it. And I got home, and 2 days after, they wanted to talk to me, and they said that they wanted to play with someone else, basically. So that was the short version. So it was definitely a kick. So what I was told, I'm not going to name drop. I don't think there's any point. But one of the players had specifically said he didn't want to play with me anymore. And then they had talked about it internally. And then it's an ultimatum kind of situation, right? Like, who do you get rid of, one guy or the other? And yeah, they chose they wanted to replace me. So it was definitely not mutual. I think we could have built something great with that team over time. And NIP as an org were really sad to see me go. So yeah, that's pretty much the short version of that story. Yeah.
Okay, but, so exactly, and you've definitely, you're not new to beginning a new team, and when that happened first, was I'm sure there are a lot of things going through your mind. Was one of them right away, well, I got to form a new team, or were you possibly even thinking of other directions? I know you casted shortly after that, of course, but were there other avenues that you're thinking about? Did you want to continue playing right away?
Yeah, I knew that I wanted to continue competing. The thing I was thinking about at the time was, should I build something of my own, or should I restrict myself to only joining an existing team so I don't have to go through the building process and all of this? Do I want to be captain or not in my team? Like, I could also just join an established team and become a player in that instead of taking more of the captaining role. But I just, I look at the opportunities and the possibilities that there are, and then I can make the best out of it. I think the team that we've got right now looks really good. As you said, my alternative, I guess always for me, an alternative is that I can go and commentate instead, because I've done it a lot. But I still have that competitive drive. So it's because I want to play. It's not because I don't want to cast. If anyone thinks that is like, anything to not cast Dota, that's not the situation. It's kind of a spoiled situation for me, I guess, that I can do both and kind of pick and choose.
Yeah.
But I definitely, I knew for sure that I wanted to do Dota. Like, if I stopped playing right now, I would continue doing Dota. Then I would do streaming and casting and whatnot, maybe coaching or something like that. But I still want to play. So that's the main thing.
Well, I was going to say, you're kind of one of those hybrids, is, one of those few, to be honest, that not only is a great caster and has casted many events, but obviously has competed also at the highest level. And frankly, I think you ask most casters, they would love to have that option. Hell, myself, I would love to be able to say, choose between the two. So it must be nice having that option, and still, obviously, you're going to attempt to compete here now with this new team. So getting into that, Crescendo. First off, what's the idea with the name Crescendo? How did that come about?
That's a good question. I actually don't know. I was just like, okay, our team needs a name, and that word appeared out of nowhere. I can't explain where it's from. Honestly, I have no idea. And I was just like, okay, I think Crescendo is nice. And then I was like, okay, what does it actually mean? And then I looked it up and I was like, this is a pretty nice name. I can get behind that. I like it. And then I asked the others. They were like, cool, sure, why not? So that's pretty much it. There's no like deep story behind or anything like that. It was just an epiphany, if you want to call it that, or something.
Yeah. All right, so we got these players coming together. Just to clarify on what the roster is, we got Babyknight, Xcalibur, yourself, EGM, and Akke in that order as far as the positions and how they're lined up here. I want to start specifically with EGM. He most recently, of course, was cut from Alliance, and then very shortly after, you had announced that he's part of your new team here. Was that something that was maybe in the works beforehand? Were you talking with him possibly before and kind of getting feeler, or did that kind of surprise you and you just jumped on it?
It was kind of a last minute thing. Akke was aware at some point close toward the deadline that EGM was going to become an available player. So then we started discussing it and looking if that would be a good fit for us. But it's not something we've been planning for weeks, because weeks ago, I don't think he knew himself or that anyone knew really that was the route Alliance decided to go. So we kind of just looked at the whole, again, we looked at the situation, we looked at what we can do. I think it's a really good opportunity for a couple of reasons. I think this type of patch is really good for EGM in the role that we want to play him. He's going to feel really comfortable playing with Akke as like good old times. They have great synergy and understanding of how each other play. So we don't need to, in the same way, build up the support duo. And apart from that, I think he's just going to fit in well in our team. So it wasn't really that difficult of a decision to make, to be honest, when we got the opportunity. Yeah, that's pretty much it for EGM. I guess it's a pretty quick process.
Yeah, no, it kind of had to be, right? You know, with all these moves happening, I can only imagine what it must have been like creating this team. You know, Babyknight is another example of that, I assume, with the whole Cloud9, how he more recently got, you know, they decided together that they're no longer going to be playing together, and they kind of went other ways, and so he became available. So I assume he was a similar situation there.
We started out earlier. We were playing with both Ace and Babyknight. And trying out Ace in a position 4 role, which EGM is playing now. It was Ace's own request. He was like, this role might be something great for me. And then the patch dropped, the big patch that changed everything. And he was a bit on the fence. Like, he was like, should I play that support role, or do I want to play carry? And he ultimately was like, okay, I want to play carry. And then he decided to go back to his old teammates, because this patch for them was similar to the one where Cloud9, when they were called Imperial, when they had the most success. So he went back to his old friend Rise. Basically, they've been playing together forever. I'm guessing he kind of convinced him, you know, to come back, come on, we're one last ride, you know. In addition to, of course, Cloud9 already being qualified for 2 lands that he would be giving up if he were to play in this team. So there were a couple of things dragging him the other way, I understand. And then, yeah, that was basically it. So when Ace decided that, we obviously had a slot available again. And when we're talking Ace, we're talking back a couple of weeks. So that means the whole EGM thing wasn't even on the table then. Yeah. And I think, in a way, we got a bit fortunate here with the timing of everything, that we could get a player of that caliber in these conditions with the pairing he has. Is kind of like, you know, a godsend in a way. So pretty lucky.
And then the next player to talk, really the last one, because Akke, you know, we know he's obviously has great history. It's understandable why you're happy to be playing with him, I'm sure. But Xcalibur, this is a guy now, speaking of Akke, of course, he's a former teammate of his on Horde, but Xcalibur is this 9K plus player that hasn't necessarily been able to be in the spotlight for most of his career, really all of it. Is this what made you decide to go with Xcalibur in the end?
So that was one of the early things. Is in the earlier stages of forming this team, I was mainly talking to Akke in the beginning, and we pretty quickly figured out that Xcalibur was the type of player we wanted to play with. Akke had good experience with him from Horde. I like personally playing with up and coming players. In a way, he's not that up and coming as others have been, because he's already had some success as a stand-in, mainly for Fnatic a while back. But as far as the last year or two goes, he hasn't really had a big breakthrough on his own. And I like taking up and coming players and giving them a platform and trying to let them shine. In a way, there's like this, when you build a team and you structure it, it's about balancing the whole, like the hunger to win and the egos of the players. If, you know, in a way, it probably makes sense to you that some players are easier to work with if they're less accomplished, because then they'll do anything they can to win, and they're less likely to cause conflicts, if that makes sense somehow, because they don't have like that ego that drags them. Not necessarily that, oh, we're losing, but I want something else, but rather too interfering with everything. Like then suddenly you want it your way because you're used to winning a lot or whatnot, and then things can get distorted a bit and get pulled in different directions. At the moment that happens to a team, it actually gets really difficult to play, because then this whole feeling of unity gets shattered pretty quickly. So either you need the captain to be like really strong and just be like my way or the highway, or you need to like have a good balance in the team with people that are willing to follow the lead and just play together like that. And I've found that historically I've played with very different players over the last years, and overall I've had the biggest success when I've played with more up and coming players and just been able to kind of run things more as a captain. If I get more conflicts in the team, or people want to take over things, and this is something I've personally been very reflective about, is that I feel like the more I've given away powers or let other try to take control of things, the worse it's gone. So that also leads over into the reason I'm actually playing offlane now, because when it comes to my previous teams, a lot of the times I've been willing to sacrifice. I've always had the mentality that anything, as long as it's for the greater good of the team. But the problem is, a lot of the times the team doesn't know what's for the greater good, doesn't necessarily act in its own interest. And therefore, in this team, I'm more like, okay, what do I like? What am I good at? And try to, what do I want to do? Like, the more you enjoy and the more you want to do what you're doing, the easier it is to improve. So I'm like, this is what I want to focus on. This is what I want to do. And by virtue of doing that and getting confident in myself, I am going to be a better leader because I feel more at home in the game itself and feel more confident about what I do. So that's been a personal thing of mine that, when I think about this year with this team, I have two like major goals. Obviously, one of our biggest goal as a team is to get to TI. But the other goal for me is to be the most improved player of the year. So really just, look after myself and improve on myself. And be less sacrificial in the sense of letting people do things their way less or more than I want to do it myself. Because like I said, I've had varying success. Okay, that was a really long monologue. I can see that.
No, hey, it was good. It was great. And actually, as a kind of a follow-up to that, with you playing the position 3 now, I happen to be interviewing somebody else recently on this similar idea that you're getting at, where what else was also playing into his idea with it was the fact that in that position 3, you tend to play a little bit more of the initiators from time to time, and it kind of lets you kind of control the pace of the game even. So you're not having to communicate to the team, what we should be doing, and then having to rely on them. Instead, you're the one just going and expecting the team then to follow you up, or, getting that idea behind it. So is that maybe some of the reasoning too behind you playing the position 3?
It's a potential benefit. I think the position 3 can be played in different ways. The teamfight initiator is definitely one style. It's a style that I personally really like. But we've seen other position 3s in the past, like farm roles, lone druid, nature's prophet. Those kind of heroes can still be played. We've seen dead laners like Abaddon and Omniknight in the last patch, where the offlaner is kind of AFK for 20 minutes. So it's not a requirement to play it like that, but that ideology definitely suits me as a player. That's also why I like the role, because I like being that initiator or playing more of a team fight oriented role in the game. But it wasn't really like, that's not the deciding factor of this, that I don't trust anyone else to do that job. That's not how you're meant to understand this. It's not what I'm trying to communicate here. I think if you ask me, anyone can be, any role can be captain, to be honest. I really think so. I think any role can be captain. Mainly, we see supports playing the captain role. We've seen offlaners, for example, RTK in China has had great success. Right now, I think Navi had Pycat as captain, who's a carry. And at the end of the day, it's more about, understanding as a team how you distribute responsibility in the game. Like, I think a lot of people who watch Dota are like, the captain is telling everyone what to do at all stages of the game. That's not how the game works, and it's not possible for anyone to grasp and handle all that. I think the captain's role is developing strategy and getting the team this whole unity feeling. So trying to enable the players the best possible. And then when it comes to some big moments in the game, like, do we go for Roshan here? Do we contest this fight? Do we defend these towers or something like that? Maybe the captain has more of a voice and is expected to lead more, but he doesn't coordinate every single little gank in the start or every single late game play. Generally, the supports will talk a lot early about those movements, and later on the carry and the mid laner are expected to carry more weight, obviously. Also in communication, it kind of just fits with your relative strength in the game. Like, the people who feel like they can do stuff will communicate more than the people who kind of need to be led in a way. So because of that, I guess that makes sense then, that in theory, any role can be captain, right? It's just about how your team works around it and understands the roles, basically.
Definitely. And so sticking with the idea that you playing position 3, as you mentioned earlier, patch 7.06 coming out recently, a lot would suggest maybe that the offlane got nerfed, specifically the shrine nerf, of course. Was that something that didn't deter you, or do you almost feel like offlane's still just fine and you're comfortable playing it, even despite the changes here?
I'd say the offlane nerfs, you definitely feel them in the game. But what you always need to remember is it's the same for both teams, right? So it's like, does anyone benefit more than the other? The players in the offlane that were able to shine mainly because of the shrine will be hit harder than the ones who weren't. And I think for myself in that position, First of all, I didn't play offlane in the previous patch, so we can't really compare it, right? But the type of heroes and the playstyle that I like is, I would say, in a lot of ways, less shrine reliant than, for example, those dead laners that I was talking about, like offlane Omni-Knight or offlane Abaddon with Poor Man's Shield Tango pack and then straight to shrine. I like playing it. I didn't have a problem with it, but I'm totally fine with playing the emerging meta offlane heroes that are more self-sufficient. We've seen a lot of Clockwork, Earthshaker, Darkseer type of offlaners, team fighters that can manipulate the creep equilibrium. Because I already like those heroes, I don't really consider this patch a nerf to me. It probably hit other players harder, to be honest. But all in all, the lane is definitely worse.
Yeah.
And it's about what team gets hit harder.
How confident are you that, I know you mentioned TI especially is, of course, going to be your big focus right here as far as qualifying for TI. How confident are you that you guys are going to be one of these better European teams? Being a new team, of course, the synergy is going to take a little bit of time, despite being a makeup of great players. But are you confident you could be one of the better EU teams out there?
Yeah, for sure. If we don't manage to become one of the better EU teams, it will be a big disappointment for me. I think this team has what it takes. We have the talent, the right mentality, the right structure. I put a lot of thought into what specific players to get in the roles based on how I want to play the game with like farm distribution, player mentality in game, how the players work overall. So, it's never a guarantee, right? It's possible. Like sometimes whenever you build a team, it can go better than expected or it can go worse. And on paper, some teams look amazing and then they fall flat, and vice versa. Some teams are like, wow, how's this team ever going to be good? And then they have a big breakthrough. Good example of that, for example, for me would be a team like now current Mouse Sports, but back then at Finnem, where nobody knew any of the players. Maybe Madara was known a bit from pubs, but largely the players were unknown. But if you have the right synergy and the right team spirit and the right teamwork, you can get really far in this game. So I would say right now, if we put in the work, we should become one of the top contestants in our region. I definitely think so. The potential is there, but I'm not one to make these bold statements. I don't like saying we're going to be the best. And that's not that I don't believe in it, but I feel like ultimate statements like that always come back to bite you in the ass. So there's no real reason to get overconfident. That doesn't mean I'm not confident, though. I just don't like putting that kind of pressure on the players in that sense. Of course.
No, and I agree. I see this roster, and my first reaction was this is going to be a dangerous roster to deal with in that region, especially. So, and that kind of leads me to this next question here. Do you feel like Dota competitive scene, you've been around for a while, do you actually feel like it's maybe the strongest it's ever been right now, or are there times in the past that maybe stand out more?
I think it gets stronger every year. I actually think it's, interestingly enough, every year it gets harder. That's how it's felt like, at least so far. The level of competition gets higher. More people understand the game better. Better teams are formed. Teams get a better understanding of, for example, this season, there's relatively few roster changes compared to what we had like 2 or 3 years ago. So the teams that have had success are stabilizing and are performing on a high level. So that, first of all, makes it more difficult for people that are looking to join a team to find one, unless you build something like what we've done this time. And also just because of that field of competition, it's very difficult just to throw together a mix and have success unless it's like really worked through. There's going to be a couple of teams probably this season, as always, that are like a mix of players with potential, and it's probably going to, just meet really hard competition. It's super difficult. I don't know. I can't really think of a year that was easier than the previous one. It's just been gradually getting harder and harder, which is healthy, I guess, overall.
Yeah. I agree there for sure. So, and one last question here. I feel like I'd be doing a disservice if I don't ask this. Was Bulldog ever an option for the team?
I talked to him a while ago. Back when we were building the team from the early stages, I was talking to Akke about it. We were considering Bulldog as one of the options, and I talked to him. I was like, "Would this be something you would be interested in?" And he was just like, I'm not going to compete right now, and maybe never again, basically. That's the short version of it. It was a very short conversation because it was very clear that he was not in that place at this current time. I think he's really enjoying what he has, to be honest. I think he's having a lot of fun with his stream, enjoy spending time with his girlfriend, and also building her stream together. They're building like a mini empire, if you will, I think, in some way. I think he's just in a really good place, and I have all full respect for that. Like if he doesn't have that competitive drive anymore, then he shouldn't force himself to. I think you're just going to play bad then. Like either you want to or you don't. And I think sometimes maybe he's like, it could be cool to come back, and if you have that but feeling, then I think it's fine not to do it then. Who knows? Like, maybe he'll play again in a year. Maybe the itch will come back for him. He hasn't been out of competition for that long, but
yeah,
it could happen. Who knows? But for now, he was asked. He was not interested. So.
Okay, well, I appreciate that answer there. And Cinderin, it's a pleasure to have you on. I really do appreciate taking the time. By the way, when do you guys plan to be playing your first matches here? Do you have anything scheduled yet?
I think we're playing a minor tournament in June. We're basically open to invites. If there's any tournament that wants us to play, we're happy to go and play and get some practice for ourselves. So we're not hitting the best timing, I guess, because some of the tournaments, such as Dream League, started a couple of weeks ago, and other tournaments have already, played their qualifiers out, such as I think the Summit has played it out. I think Epicenter is done with all their qualifiers that we could have participated in. They're just placed in a way so you actually can't participate in them if you do go for this roster switch up. So yeah, we're looking to play. I do know we have that one tournament in June. I think that's it for now, and we're hoping to get one or two more under our belt going into TI to get some more experience and practice together. So yeah, that's pretty much it for now, I think.
All right, look forward to it, Cinderin. Again, thanks for joining me, and best of luck moving forward here, man.
Thank you. You're welcome. My pleasure.
All right, really happy to have Cinderin on there. Obviously, a man with plenty of insight. He's been around for so long, you can definitely tell that. And thanks once again. Big shout out to Cinderin for joining us here on the DotPro. So, got some great insight there on one of the newest teams, Crescendo, one of the newest roster situations. Really one of the only new full teams that definitely has come about. But so before we talk about some other roster changes that happened, first, as I was kind of hinting at before, again, the roster lock was actually postponed 2 days. So here it was. I'm doing this recording today. It was yesterday was supposed to be the official lock of the rosters, and that was done. However, people were noticing a couple things. One being Thunderbirds specifically wasn't actually registered, and that kind of rose a couple of eyebrows. And then there were several teams from the Chinese region and several players even that weren't necessarily registered either. And so when the announcement came all of a sudden that they had another 2 days, it kind of got thinking of like, well, why? Well, what was the idea behind this? Personally, my rumor is, my thought is, I guess I should say my theory. I wouldn't be surprised going back to this whole A situation with what's going on in Chinese Dota. If this is part of Valve, perhaps being in talks with them and really trying to get something figured out, and whether it was Ace that went to Valve or vice versa or whatever, simply talked about extending the time. They needed a little bit more time to get things figured out with what's been going on lately with these bans and the whole situation over in Chinese Dota 2. I would not be surprised if that had something to do with it. Again, I have nothing to really back this up, so definitely don't take this for fact. But this is just my personal opinion as far as why maybe the roster lock was postponed a couple of days. And then there's the Thunderbird situation, which again, I don't know if that's something we should be looking into or not. Is that maybe a suggestion that Thunderbirds isn't going too well and they might be having some internal disputes? I do not know. All I know is that I'm actually looking at the registration right now. Again, there's still time to register. There's still another day and a half, or a little over a day to register here as I'm doing this recording. It's going to be later on Friday. Thunderbirds currently only has 4 players on it. It's Wee, Moon, Saksa, and Misery. So Resolution still has not signed up for Thunderbirds, unless I'm missing him somewhere. I'm going to assume that's the case. It doesn't look like he's been registered yet. And now, again, he still has a little bit of time to register. And by the time this podcast is out, there's a chance, pretty good chance probably he will be. But the fact that they weren't even registered before the initial deadline is what kind of gets me suspicious as far as, what we should be looking into this, right? So, but yeah, that's my personal take. Is it a big deal? I don't think it is. I think it's fine. I mean, I'm I would hate to see Valve be very strict on that, and because there's already been several, like I'm looking at the list right now, it's not only Thunderbirds, there was this, there's been several players from different teams from South America to China. White Fries Gaming, this is a team that was just formed apparently out of China, so there's a couple of players that definitely come to mind where you're like, oh, well, maybe it's good that they let them have, you know, a couple of extra days. And I don't think it really hurts anyone. You could argue that it sets a bad precedent moving forward, that, oh, should we really think that that's actually going to be a deadline? I don't think that's the case. I think it's just fine that the roster lock was actually postponed, and as long as it's for good reasons, and it seems like it was here. Now, as far as roster changes that have took place that are definitely more notable, so we'll start with the big one here. Alliance. You know, so we talked about last week how Alliance could have possibly been a team that we should look forward to maybe having some changes. I really did not think it would happen in the end. I really did not, but there was part of me that was like, maybe they need something, because this is a team that's frankly had disappointing results when you look at their overall history. We're talking about a team that obviously won TI3, has such a prestigious history. Now, again, it's, as I've mentioned before, it's not fair to the current players to expect them to live up to those expectations, mainly because you could also argue that Dota 2 is always getting more competitive and always getting tougher, if anything. But it still just seemed like, even watching them, it was hard to really see this team being a top tier team like we should expect them, like it feels like we expect them to be. What that change was going to be, I thought if anything, it was going to have to do along the lines of maybe Hanskin, even maybe Jonathan Fan, maybe one of those guys. It ended up being EGM. EGM dropped from Team Alliance officially, and this happened right after the Starladder event, literally before they even were going home. And there's actually some kind of frankly funny tweets that were posted about them all kind of like standing together, and EGM has his head down and everyone else is kind of laughing around him. It's just like, geez, that's fucked up. But no, so now obviously EGM now being a part of Crescendo, so I guess, you know, maybe I should have pointed that out before we interviewed Cinderin there and talked about Crescendo, but I'm sure you could have did the math at that point. Personally, I wouldn't be surprised if this is something that maybe has been in the works for just a little bit, because I know Loda especially maybe has this history of being kind of, you know, not maybe the nicest person at times, but I just can't see them like truly going up to him right after this tournament and being like, hey, you're kicked off the team, right? Something tells me this had to possibly be something that was talked about beforehand, and whether or not Cinderin was actually, you know, in talks with them beforehand as well, who knows? But I wouldn't be surprised if this was a mutual agreement ultimately, because EGM, you know, he has found out a new home right away with Crescendo. And EGM, frankly, he's a great player, obviously, and a lot of people would argue in that they were kind of using him wrong. You know, they weren't really using him as that 4. They were playing him more as the 5 position quite a bit, where EGM's history comes from playing that aggressive 4, and that's where a lot of his success comes from. So there's maybe that idea that they weren't using him the best, but whatever it is, dropped from Alliance, now on Crescendo. I think that's ultimately a better fit for EGM anyways, and I think it's one of those situations where he's probably happier in the end. Now, Pablo is announced as the replacement for EGM. Pablo's not a player that, you know, you may recognize the most. Now, he comes from Horde, which is obviously kind of the sister team that formerly was, the one that Akke had led with Horde and Xcalibur, in fact, talking about that name earlier and so on. Before that, though, he really hasn't been on much. There was one team, I guess he was on a team called Cookies, I'm looking at right now, but never really had the most success. Didn't even win any prize money when he was with them. So Pablo's a pretty new player in general. Replacing such a prestigious player like EGM with a very new player that really just hasn't had the most success, it's a very curious decision, and it kind of goes back to, I wonder if this was more Alliance or more EGM suggesting that maybe he wanted out of some sort, and because maybe this Crescendo situation came up, and it kind of put Alliance in a spot of, well, we got to find a replacement. Who's out there, right? Like, they can't just grab anyone they want. I mean, they got to find who's there. And, well, Pablo was what happened to be one of those players. Now, again, this is not a stab against Pablo. I'm sure he's a great player, and I'm sure he's potentially going to fit in just fine with the team. But those are some big shoes to fill. And again, just something about this whole situation just doesn't seem like it's as face value. It doesn't seem like it's 100% Alliance's decision, if you get what I'm saying here. So, anyways, again, more speculation. I don't know for sure, but just my opinion there. A couple other roster changes. Team Freedom actually officially picked up a new team. They picked up the former IsGG team. So, or they're also known as, Team Stan, I want to say. I'm trying to pull them up right now, actually, so I can clarify the roster. Yeah, so we are looking at Stan King, Francis Lee, Snake King, CCNC, and Yarwar. I'm really excited for this roster. I've been excited for this. CCNC is a player. I got the chance to talk with him quite a bit at the Kiev Major Qualifiers. He was at the BTS Hub, of course, and is one of the analysts there, and he's just been a fun player to kind of watch. He's a much younger player, but it's kind of been fun seeing his progression. No doubt one of the stronger mid players in the American region in general. So I'm happy to see him on a solid team here now. On this note, though, Team Freedom did unfortunately announce that they will not be attending Zodak, the LAN coming up here. Despite them qualifying for it again, remember they knocked out Complexity was the big name there to qualify for the Zodak Cup, and so going to be going and everything. But really excited for that. But yeah, they just announced earlier this week that they're not going to be able to go because Yarwar apparently having some visa issues actually getting there. So in the end, they're not going to be going to Atlanta. That stings a bit because this team is going to need some of that LAN experience to really, help them, I feel like, moving forward. So the fact that they're not going to be able to go to that, I'm sure it's not a decision that they like in the end, but it is what it is. Apparently, Complexity was asked to possibly be a replacement for them, but going back to the whole NP being banned by Dream League situation of dropping out, Complexity decided they wanted to keep up their commitment to Dream League, and thus they decided that they were not going to go to Zodak, which actually was going to be overlapping with the Dream League event. So instead of that, they actually ended up fighting Digital Chaos, actually. Now, that's also interesting because Digital Chaos also is in the Dream League qualifiers for the American region. So NP already dropped out because they're playing in this event. Yeah, I think I misstated that earlier, by the way. NP, they chose not to compete in the Dream League or they dropped out because they're going to be playing in the Zodak Cup here. So, but now DC is going to be playing in it, apparently. So, Dream League might be in another spot of, we have to get another team. So, it hasn't officially happened yet. I mean, I haven't heard any news just yet, but I mean, it's coming, right? Like, DC can't play both in a LAN in Taipei as well as an American qualifiers unless they plan to make that happen at the LAN. I mean, it's again their ping's gonna suck, but maybe that is the plan. I guess that could be a possibility, or maybe they're trying to get a rescheduled sort of thing going. Who knows? Anyways, goes back to Team Freedom. It's cool to see them being picked up by an organization. Team Freedom, not maybe the biggest organization by any means, but it is a solid one at that. It's one that's been a staple in America Dota 2 for a little bit here. And I'm glad to see them getting a sponsorship like this. Also mentioned earlier, Faith Beyond and Y joined eHome. Garter actually also joining the team. So eHome making some roster changes in general right here. But they're now banned by Ace. So that's going to be interesting to say the least, to see where things go from here when it comes to eHome's new roster. But we are looking at Old Chicken, CTY, Faith Beyond, Garter, and Y. I mean, that's a really good lineup, man. This eHome team, they may be banned by Ace, but again, they can still compete in a lot of these, and really any of these LANs, obviously, when it comes down to it. So who knows? That's going to be fun to see how they do. Complexity also officially announced. We had Mills on last week, of course, but we pretty much knew this was coming. But officially now, Firo and Demon are their new players. So they have their full five of Moo, Z-Freak, Melons, Firo, and Demon. And Eclipse is a new Chinese team. Speaking of some other X-Wings players, we got Shadow actually forming up with Shiki, JDH, and LPC, a couple of names from Chinese Dota 2 history right there, and forming this team, again, what they're calling Eclipse. Now, they only have 4 players, and I'm actually double-checking here on the signups. Yeah, so they're apparently still trying to figure out their 5th member here. Again, another one of these situations where I wouldn't be surprised if they, too, are a reason why maybe the delay happened with the roster lock. So, but yeah, those are the more significant ones. Obviously, there's a couple other minor ones here and there, but not really worth too much getting into. Don't know if we should expect a lot out of them. Well, actually, I will say there is one team where the former Cloud9. So initially, it was expected that Cloud9 was going to be just outright disbanding and maybe not playing together anymore. That's not the case. Cloud9 is now known once again as Danish Bears, so we've come full circle. And as we found out with Cinderin there in the interview that just happened, so apparently, Ace actually was a possible player on Crescendo until other things took place. So now he's back playing with the team, and then their new 5th actually is 747, the American player who was most recently on Complexity until being dropped from them. So he's actually going to be playing for Danish Bears in the upcoming Zodak LAN. At least that's what has on the official roster here. So that's kind of an interesting little addition in its own right there. All right, so you keeping up with me, guys? Keeping up with all these roster situations? Yeah, I know it's confusing, man. Doing my best to make it as clear as possible. Hopefully did a decent job of that at least. So again, there's still a couple more days though, or day and a half. So we may have some more announcements next week's show. We're planning this would be it, and we talk about all the final rosters. But with the extension, I don't know if we should expect too much. Again, there is the Thunderbird situation. Like I said, Resolution still has not signed up. There's a couple of these teams. We talked about Eclipse. It's going to be interesting to see who their new 5th is, excuse me. But, yeah, we'll have to wait and see. We'll have to wait and see for next week's show how that goes. But we've done enough waiting and seeing for our next guest that we're going to be joined by to talk about these Manilla Masters. Again, they did officially start late last night, early this morning as I'm doing this recording here, but going to have somebody on that is actually at the Manilla Masters as one of the casters. TrentPax going to be joining us. TrentPax, how's it going, man?
Hello. Very excited. It's going quite well. All settled in here, basically, as we start to get ready for day number 1.
Day number 1 coming up right here, but this isn't your first LAN you've necessarily been to, but you've been to a couple others, Northern Arena, there's maybe another one out there, but this is the most prestigious, no doubt, that you've been to. In a sense, you're maybe a newbie consisting of the other casters that are out there. Are you nervous? What's that feeling you got?
Yeah, definitely. I haven't really been on the Northern Arena LAN. That was a lot of like Moonduck, so it's like kind of my crew. So although some of them definitely have like more LANs under their belt, it still feels more comfortable to be around them. Like I'm used to them a lot. I cast them a lot online and stuff. But in terms of everyone who's here, it's the big dogs, from a lot of the other groups. So we haven't had a lot of practice together, and I don't know them all too well. And of course they're still a little. You kind of look up to these guys, of course, right? As many of you guys, I'm sure, do in terms of like anyone who's aspiring casters or just enjoy good Dota. You get a little bit of star power around them, so it's kind of fun to just get a chance to actually cast with all of them and cast for what I hear is a very excitable crowd here in Manila.
Yeah, no, look forward to that. And speaking of that, too, though, as far as the production goes and everything, do a great job in the past. I'm expecting the same here. But as far as prep for that, the rehearsal, have you guys just been doing a lot of rehearsal so far?
Yeah, they have all the tech stuff going on at the arena right now. And so tomorrow we're going to have the players playing off stage, as it'll just be getting ready into the next stage of the upper bracket, and we'll start getting people sent down into that lower bracket. So we'll probably, without like actual audience members there and stuff like that, we'll kind of get the feel for the arena while we're doing that tomorrow. And then we'll all be kind of prepped up for that big production when everyone shows up. So it's everything I hear is going pretty well over there.
Has there been any fun behind-the-scenes stories yet? Putting you on the spot here, but anything that's been kind of entertaining? Maybe, perhaps Whistler Action Slacks. He seems to be good with those.
Oh, well, of course, I'm sure you guys all saw the toilet. That's the number one. That was very exciting. A toilet just magically opens when you open the door. But it's kind of crazy to just come into this hotel too, because it's like a casino, right? It's amazing that there's just these like hundreds of tables, just blackjack and all you can imagine. So some people getting very excited about that. Everyone's just like super like accommodating, of course, because it's a very fancy place that we're staying at. So they're just kind of like, here, come here, sir. I'm sirs all over the place. I keep thinking they're like confusing me for someone else. See, they don't know I'm out of place. That's the best part. You know, the people who are working here at the hotel, they think I'm just as important as Toby. It's great.
There you go. It's that sounds like it's a lot of fun there. So they're treating you well. So let's talk about the tournament itself now. So there's 8 teams that are here at this event. Of the first round matchups, is there one that you're really excited for? Well, first off, which one are you do you know which matchup you're casting initially?
I believe I'm only going to be casting, in terms of casting, a single series, and I think it's going to be IG versus Clutch Gamers. That's what it sounds like, and that will be tomorrow. And then I'll be paneling for the rest of the event, which I'm excited for because I do enjoy paneling, but it's nice to also get a chance to do a little bit of casting. And I am so glad. I really, really, really hope that's the case and that's the matchup I get, because I'm pretty excited to watch Clutch Gamers compete at this tournament. They're a team that I've been casting since their birth in SCA, and kind of been touting them as I thought they were a pretty strong squad, and then they qualified for 4 lands, and I was feeling a little bit, vindicated there. It's pretty great.
Yeah, we've mentioned them a couple of times these recent episodes on this podcast itself, and for good reason. As you're saying, this is a team that just almost feels like they came out of nowhere to an extent. I mean, they're not completely new players, but at the same time, they kind of are as far as lately goes, and taking over the Southeast Asian scene. So is that the number one matchup that you're really looking forward to?
100% for me. There's no question. I think a lot of people are excited just to watch NP for the first time on the newer patch and everything. So they're looking forward to that versus OG, which is definitely a very tough battle for them, for sure. I'm also, in terms of the second team that I'm watching for this tournament, I'm very excited about Newbie. I really want that team to do well. I feel like they still have all the same keys that they had like when they were succeeding in the past, but it feels like they just keep, I don't know, missing a step or something there. KP can't quite find his footing like he used to in the past. It's almost that same comparison people were making to Mind Control prior to Starladder, which he definitely stepped it up, and it felt like he was able to make an impact either just by the strategy of the team changing, or maybe the heroes being given to him, priority given to him changed. Something let that guy flourish, and he had some, like, that crazy Earthshaker game was amazing, and if I feel like that same flair can rise out of someone like KP because he's just such a talented individual.
Absolutely. Well, so as far as where is it at here? There was an event recently, the Starladder, of course, last weekend that took place. I assume you watched, at least a little bit of that, if not all of it, and to get an idea, especially of 7.06 and with a new patch and everything, a very big patch to say the least. Is there something from that event that you're expecting to see here at the Manilla Masters?
Yeah, I think there's a ton of questions coming out of the event. Actually, it's pretty exciting. Wondering how much of an influence, like, we've already seen it online. Everyone's going for the Jakiro. The Clockwork Jakiro is one of the most popular 2-3 openers, at least in my experience of games I've been casting or watching since the tournament. And the hero's getting a lot of love, so kind of curious as to how he's doing in the scrims maybe right now over at the player hotel. If everyone's still on Jakiro, does that bring in Darkseer? Are we into a Wombo combo kind of a meta going on here? Because a lot of those big games in Starladder, there was, I think it was the Liquid IG series was the most important one, where it was just game number 1, Team Liquid. They looked like they were going to win. They had this nice lineup. Everything was going well. And then one lost Wombo combo fight at the Roche Pit. And then the whole game turns, and they just end up winning on the side of IG. Game 2, IG are suddenly leading. They're about to close out the series, and your eventual champions of Starladder almost got eliminated. But they won that big fight, And they're able to bring it back in that mid-game. Coming on the back of these big Wombo combos via Darkseer or Jakiro again. Kunkka is another big one. So kind of Enigma. He was the black hole is what really did it there. So that's kind of my little curious ones right now.
Yeah, and 7.06 again, being so dramatic as far as changes go. Well, how do you feel about these bigger patches coming out? Obviously, after the Boston Major, we had 7.0. Now, after the Kiev Major, we have 7.06, and
tough
two
to top
really
that
significant
one,
changes. Exactly, right? Like, do you think it's healthy for the scene overall that we do have these big changes after a major? Or would you rather maybe see it a little more consistent throughout the year?
That's a tough one. I think certain certain teams would probably have a different answer for that. I would imagine certain teams probably feel more comfortable like digging deeper into one patch. Like I wouldn't want them to be on a set schedule. I definitely like the idea of sometimes a patch just goes long and sometimes a patch is just really short. And I think IceFrog just kind of has this feeling inside of him where, barring 6.86, which was like, or 6.84, whichever one was the troll. I think that was 6.84, 6.83. One of those, whichever was Troll Sniper, that I don't know what happened there. IceFrog was like on vacation or something. That patch might have lasted a bit too long. And but even in those super long patches, the meta changes with very minor tweaks. Like maybe you'll get a couple letters here and there, but I really enjoy watching that meta change and develop simply because of players finding answers rather than IceFrog finding answers to a hero. I remember like the Leshrac patch of TI 6, is that right? TI 5.
I believe. I think it was TI 6.
No, it'll be 5. Sorry, I'm crazy. It's TI 5. Yeah, sorry, that's my fault. It's late. But basically, like that whole patch, Leshrac was essentially ignored until halfway through that patch, and that patch lasted like months. And well, Leshrac was never even picked. Like no one even cared. And then suddenly he was just like, a couple heroes got tweaked down a little bit, and then Leshrac was just boom, like all the way to the top. And then even after TI, we saw Leshrac like fall back out of favor again without too much of a change. So it's just that whole idea of watching the players discover that stuff is very interesting. That if you have too fast of changes, of course, you can't appreciate that. But at the same time, you don't get the same hero burnout with more fast-paced changes, such as like a very quick tweak to Sven that we just got to try and dull down that god strength a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sven has definitely been one of the big topic ones of this patch, no doubt, as you mentioned. He did get that slight nerve, so, do those minor changes post. But, so is there... How do you feel overall about 7.06 so far? Now that we've got to see a land with it, we've had a little bit of time. We've got to play with it, I assume. Overall, for me personally, and from talking to other people, it seems like it's been overall a general consensus that it's a good patch. It's a really good patch for the game. Do you feel the same? Yeah,
definitely. I think a lot of it's addressing the new things that were added in 7.00 and trying to kind of tweak those into a healthier part of Dota, just kind of understanding like, all right, I totally get IceFrog adding respawn talents. I think that's definitely a thing to be explored. When cooldown reductions came in, a lot of people were upset. And the same thing with when Aetherlens was first brought in. Aetherlens and Octarine Core both kind of created this thing in the community. They're like, whoa, this item reduces cooldowns. Like that's going to change how I feel the game. That's like, how am I going to know? Like, I can't play by feel that this Kunkka suddenly is X back when he's not supposed to, or something stupid like that. Or that was the same thing when Shocker Magic got that change where it added that. So those things had to be tweaked a little bit. And then Aether Lens plus the idea that your intelligence changes the magic spell created the same sort of anger and frustration of the community. So it's respawn talents are exactly the same. I think it's still a facet to be explored because we're always trying to make Dota more complicated. But eventually that does make it greater and it gives you more options. So respawn talents and just talents in general, I suppose, being added in that complexity. Plus shrines were the other big one. Much like respawn talents, a thing to be explored, these new buildings, this early game assistance, maybe they were a bit too much. They opened up the offlane to some kind of crazy antics through like early pressure and just being able to abuse those for those quick heals and mana.
Yeah. Not as relevant anymore. So, yeah, the respawn talents, taking away that, I made the point when the big podcast that we did for patch 7.06 is, for me, it's just, I just love how they added all the customization for each individual hero as a result of removing set of respawn talents or replacing them with something that impacts one of their abilities. That seems like, yes, it's putting more complexity to the game, as you pointed out, but it's Dota, man. Dota's supposed to be complex, right? That's why so many people love it in the end.
Yeah, it just means it gives you a better tailored hero to address what you're facing in that game. That's
exactly. Good. All right, so back to the event itself. So this might be a little confusing of a question, but is there so obviously we got TI coming up. We got TI 7. Mm-hmm. God, it's what, 2 months away? I mean, 3 months away, about a little less than 3 months. Point is, a lot of these teams are competing for a eventual invite spot to TI. I think it's safe to say that right now, of the teams that are in this event, OG is really the one that's like, you're certain they're going to get an invite. No matter really like, how they do.
Yeah, you're just trying to cause problems if you think they're not getting an invite. You know what I mean? Like, there's not even a debate. It's just, yeah.
I think every other team, to an extent, you could argue it's not guaranteed. I mean, EG and Newbie, a little bit rocky, and then the rest is like definitely not. Is there, out of these other 7 teams then, which one stands out to you that needs to win the most to prove that they deserve an invite, basically, to TI7? Which team needs to win this tournament to prove their shot, or get that invite, I should say?
I think that's a great question, because that's exactly what we were kind of talking about. We were having breakfast the other day, and it was I was sitting down there with Toby and God, Slacks, and Grant, and this kind of conversation just kind of came up, like, and we, I don't know, just kind of thinking about, like, who is it? You know, who here, OG, we all agree is 100%, but this idea of just like EG, for example, they have, they've had good showings and stuff, and they always get eliminated by OG, so it's kind of rough that, like, just because you're not finishing second place, but you're on the same bracket side as OG in every single tournament. So it's like, okay, well, this is kind of frustrating, right? Like, if we're on the other side, maybe we'd be second place everything, and everyone would just kind of be like, oh, they've came second at every single event this whole year, so how are they not rock solid or something? So I agree that they're not a lock. I think there is definitely options. Valve has shown. You never know, right? Who they're going to invite, what they're going to do. So basically everyone, but I think the teams that could guarantee themselves a direct invite to TI if they won this tournament would be Evil Geniuses. I think you could make the case for Team Secret that if they win this, they get to go. I would argue. And I think those are my only two direct 100% locks that they would get invited.
Okay.
And to that next tier, I think if Clutch Gamers won this and they performed somewhat decently at all those other lands they've qualified to, that could be a great team to invite. I mean, how could you deny that? They've done so well in their region. And then everyone else is kind of that team. They like gotta win some lands, or they gotta do exceptionally well. Like, if you want any hope at a direct TI invite, NP would they need to like win like this land and then do exceptionally well in some others. Same thing with Faceless. And I think Newbie and IG are kind of in that tier. Maybe I'm undervaluing IG a little bit here. Like, if they won this, maybe that would be enough of a lock for them. So perhaps they're around that same tier as Secret now that I think about it. But still, more, I would say Secret's perhaps ranked a little bit higher in my book right now.
All right, so to get to the end here, I like to finish things off on kind of like a quick fire segment of sorts. So the first answer that pops into your head, if you don't mind, answering it and moving along with it. So we're going to start with an interesting one here. Is Team Secret better or worse with the App Store?
Better.
All right. Will Clutch Gamers get top 3?
Yes.
Ooh. Oh, you like Clutch Gamers.
I'm feeling bold. I know I had to check myself. That's why I paused. Just like, is that really just my own bias coming through? Or do I actually think they could get top 3? And I think they could do it. I think they could get top 3. It's not that hard. You just win that upper bracket series, and it's not like they're seeded into the lower bracket. Just need a couple good rolls to go your way, a couple good DD runes by the Roche Pit, and you could be top 3.
They're the home team to an extent too. I mean, there's they got the crowd behind them, so that's, you never know. They
won that Philippine qualifier slot. They're in.
Sven will have a higher win percentage than 75%.
No.
Okay, I should have prefaced that with, at Starladder he was 7 and 8, so he was like 85%. So
yeah, I did check that actually earlier, and I was looking at, but I think with the nerf and teams being, I assume, more prepared, we should see that drop a bit.
All right, and then the final quick fire here. Which team will win the Manilla Masters?
I'm saying EG. I think this is their time. I think your OG, you just like basically just won the major. Honestly, it doesn't feel like it was that long ago. They weren't at Starladder and stuff, but how hungry can you really be? I know they're a great team, and I know maybe you could say the same thing before they're just winning other majors, but I just feel like EG just need this so bad. So I'm kind of hoping for that team in itself that they're the team that does it. Would feel deserved of the talent that we kind of expect out of them. So that will be my pick.
All right, Trent Pax, you passed. Congratulations.
Oh, good.
Appreciate it.
There's a scoring rubric. I didn't even realize.
I know you were nervous and everything, but no, you passed.
Tough quiz.
Well job. Or good job, even. Well job. Anyways, I want to thank you, obviously, for joining me. I know you're a busy guy, especially out there, and it's late at night, actually, as we're doing this recording here. So do appreciate it, Trent Pax. Any shout-outs you want to say? Anything you want to say?
I'm trying to think of because now you got me curious. Like, what hero do I think is going to have the highest win rate? Trying to think of like who's that clutch pick that it could be. I'm going to go with Razor. I think Razor's going to do pretty well this tournament. I think maybe he can come out a little bit. We got Fata here. You never know. So I'm adding a question to your quiz, and the answer is Razor.
There you go.
The Sven
Razor,
one was
huh?
pretty high, though. I'm a little scared.
I've always been a fan of Razor. I really have been, but obviously he has not been relevant as he was picked up 3 times. I'm seeing at the Starladder. He did go 2-1 there. So
Yeah, he gets some nice buffs. I think he does well against a lot of these heroes. Like, you pick him into this Bristleback. We see teams picking up the Lone Druid, too. You can, like, Drain the Bear. OD, he does really well with against mid. So I feel like heroes that end up with a high win rate, in a lot of situations, unless they're super overpowered like Sven was, they tend to be these, like, 4th or 5th picks that, like, through a draft, maybe there wasn't time to ban them out, and you're like, shit, we just got razored. And I feel like that could possibly happen due to the nature of, like, some of the heroes he's good against coming back into the meta. But we'll see. It's kind of a YOLO.
all right, Trent Pax, once again, thank you for joining me, and obviously best of luck at Manila. I'm sure you're going to have a lot of fun, man.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, and I hope you guys all enjoy it from home.
All right, so yeah, speaking of the Manilla Masters right there, obviously a lot of these lands going on here. They're really significant, as we kind of touched on, because not only for the prize pool, but the teams are playing for that TI invite spot. Now, what I thought would be fun is ranking these lands and what I personally think the order should be as far as how significant these lands are in terms of your placement in them and how it should determine whether or not you get a TI invite spot. Now, I will say this also comes a little bit off of a Twitter feud that was going on here. In fact, even earlier today as I'm doing this recording, and there's a couple of people involved, one being Nahaz and the other being Knoxville. Both of these guys are stats guys, but so kind of take you through the whole story. For the initial post was actually made by Gods from BTS there. He just simply made a post about how his big 4 are OG, EG, IG, and VP. Those are those big 4 teams. You know, that's obviously a good list. It's hard to argue that in a lot of ways. Whatever. Then Knoxville went on to make the point. Those 4 teams are the closest things that have locks right now for TI7. And then he went on to say about the winner for the Manilla Masters plus Epicenter as well. Whatever. And then he went on to suggest maybe Liquid based on Starladder, but he doesn't feel like Starladder was that big of a deal, and it was more of a filler pick, or that they would be a filler pick if anything. This got Nahaz going, where Nahaz then started to back it up with some stats, suggesting that it's ridiculous to suggest Liquid's a filler pick. You know, they're one of the best early game teams, and then Knoxville responded, well, stats like that don't actually matter in the end. Long story short, they had a feud back and forth, whatever. But it brought up the interesting idea as far as ranking lands is kind of my going back to the ultimate point right here. And so I decided to have some fun with it. So as far as significance in terms of whether or not it'll help you get a spot as a invite for upcoming TI7. Now, off the bat, I'll say this. I'm not as confident as their big 4. I think the only 2 teams right now that are... Frankly, you know what? I only think there's only one absolute lock, and that's OG. OG's an absolute lock. They could literally finish last place in all these lands, and they're still going to get an invite spot. That's not going to happen, but they are 100% an absolute lock, no questions asked. Then it gets, for me at least, it gets a little bit, you know, I feel like obviously Virtus Pro is another team on that list of they possibly deserved a lock no matter how they do. But I don't, just how they did with the Boston Major itself, and then kind of after that, they weren't really playing anything. I really want to see them at these lands here coming up, at least a couple of them that they're playing in. I think that they need to do at least decent in these lands, not necessarily win them, but decent to qualify. So they're not a lock for me. They are on the cusp. Very possible, but OG for me is the only team that's 100% in my mind an absolute invite spot. With that in mind, I got the rank here of the lands that matter and in the order. So we'll start right off the bat. We got Epicenter is the number 1, and I think across the board this has kind of got to be the overall consensus number 1 here as far as significance. Now, there's a couple of reasons for it. One is it's a $500,000 land. It's a $500,000 land. That is the most prizable land outside of a major here that's taken place in this time period, at least. So Now, I'm not saying money should be the only determinant by any means. It just so happens to be that it is the number one as far as prize pool goes. Now, I do think there's a little bit, though, that suggests that maybe it should matter because teams are that much more likely to really want to commit to it, right? And make a priority that this is a LAN that they want to attend and make sure to go to and give their 100% effort through the qualifiers and to get to that point. And when you also look at the teams participating, it is a very, very good lineup of teams. In fact, there's 10 teams that are at it. 7 of the 10 teams were at the Kiev Major. So that right off the bat is, okay, yeah, no, this is very, very big deal. OG, Evil Geniuses, Virtus Pro, Liquid, and Invictus Gaming were the invited teams. Then you have Thunderbirds, Secret, Clutch Gamers, and LFY actually were the qualified teams. So, and then there's one more team that happened to be the public vote. Na'Vi, shocking, they got the last spot. So I think they deserve it, though. They've definitely been showing a lot of strength lately. So, but that was kind of funny to see. Anyways, Epicenter for me has to be the number one LAN. The lineup is insane. It's a very, very good lineup. I also like their format. They are doing a group stage format into a... well, it's actually only a single elimination. Interesting. Where the top 3 make it on. The first place seeds do get that bye in the first round, though, and the second and third face off. So I kind of like that, actually. Having the elimination in the group stages, it definitely makes those that much more relevant, and then moving forward there. So I think between the format, the prize pool, and just the teams participating, Epicenter, if you win Epicenter, you should get a TI invite spot. I think that has to be the case. So outside of OG winning Epicenter, whichever team wins it, they're getting that spot. Now, obviously, OG's getting it no matter what. That's why I say that. Clutch Gamers, if they win this tournament, they should get a TI spot. I mean, yes, that might sound funny now. That might sound like, okay, really, Breaky, what are you saying? If they make it through this field, though, of this quality competition and win it all, damn right they deserve a TI spot. Anyways, so they're number one on the list. Then second is currently the event going on, actually, the Manilla Masters. I think Manilla Masters, it's almost got this prestigious feel, right? It's the Masters. It's not the major. It's the Masters, though. And it's a $250,000 prize pool. Still a fair amount of money, of course. Again, goes back to the competition as well. Very good. The format, it is just a straight up double elimination format. So that's where I'm a little like, I do prefer to see that kind of round robin as we saw in the Epicenter into the bracket stage to truly help get the best result, I think. But this is also fine. It's worthy of the second most significant one. We're getting to a spot where if you win this, I don't think it necessarily guarantees you an invite. Probably, though. I mean, I'm looking at it. You got Evil Geniuses, OG, Newbie, Secret, NP, Invictus Gaming, Faceless, and Clutch Gamers. Once again, Clutch Gamers, this team, man. Actually, well, what? We had 6 of these 8 teams were at the Kiev Major. NP and Clutch Gamers would be the teams that weren't. Clutch Gamers is on an amazing hot streak, though. NP is a pretty new team, obviously, with their roster. So, from that perspective, okay, yeah, I'm kind of selling myself now. Yeah, I think if you win the Manilla Masters, you deserve an invite spot. So there you go. Epicenter and Manilla Masters, so far on the list, you deserve an invite spot if you win that. Third on the list, I have the Starladder I-League, which just took place, obviously. We kind of talked about this a little bit earlier. This is this definitely is the first one where I'm like, okay, I don't know if this should guarantee you a spot, and Liquid being the team that won it, I think it definitely helps their chances, and if they do decent enough in these other LANs, then they're probably going to get a LAN invite or a TI7 invite, but this is not enough to just simply say, oh, they won Starladder, yeah, they're invited. You look at the lineup that we had at this event. Now, it was a group stage into a playoff. It was a pretty simple. It was only 8 teams, which so far is the smallest field that we had. Well, actually, no. Manila is 8 teams, right? Yes, Manila is 8 as well, to be fair. So, I guess it is equivalent to that. But the teams that were in this one, not as significant in my opinion. You know, we had Team Faceless, obviously. they're kind of an up and down rocky team. Alliance, clearly something was going on there. Vega Squadron, a good team, but not one that screams out, oh yeah, great competition to go against. VGJ has been really struggling lately, really going into the Kiev Major, and after they're a team that's kind of just falling apart, it almost feels like. I can't come around to convince myself that this is a tournament, especially with how short it looks. It was a simple group stage into a 4-team playoff bracket. It just seems so small. I almost rather would have seen a double elimination. If you're only going to have 8 teams, part of me almost rather would see it just a double elimination format instead from the beginning. But point is, I have this third on my list. So again, at a point where not significant enough to get you a spot for winning it in case of Team Liquid, but close. Summit 7 is 4th on my list. Summit 7 is mid-June. Now, we're getting to the point where we do have to, it's going to be interesting because when they actually announce the invites is obviously significant for this too. Now, from my understanding, last year's invites came out in late June, late June, right before the open qualifier started. I assume it's going to be similar this time around. So, if that's the case, then it means that Summit 7 will matter, and the invites will probably come out right after this Summit 7 takes place. And actually, there's another LAN, Galaxy Battles, down the list that I'll get into in a second. But going back to Summit 7, though, as far as the impact, the biggest issue with Summit 7, as far as maybe why it's not higher on the list, one, it's a $100,000 prize pool, which obviously, isn't bad by any means. But it is the equivalent to the Starladder. Obviously, the Manila and then the Epicenter are higher. But Summit 7 always kind of has had this feeling of our team's really giving it their best, right? The big sell for Summit 7 is, one, the content that they put on just in general is always fantastic, with how much fun they have with the teams and the players and how just light the attitude is and the atmosphere. But it does take away the significance of winning said event, I feel like. So that alone is why I think you do have to put them below these other big tier LANs. And with that said, I mean, the competition is actually pretty damn good overall. You got Virtus Pro, VGJ, Secret, Clutch Gamers, C-Deck from China. You got Navi, NP, and then we still need to find out one more team. But even just reading that off, and I'm sure you guys would agree, that's not as strong as these other tournaments that we have had. So if you win Summit 7, great. You're going to get your share of that $100,000 prize pool. Definitely don't think it should have a massive impact in terms of you qualifying for TI7. And then there's a couple other LANs here worth going over. Zodak is 5th on my list, actually. Again, Zodak, it's a solid $100,000 LAN. It's going to happen in Taipei here this coming week even. But a similar situation where you look at the teams competing. Yeah, now we're getting to a point where it's okay. Yeah, it really doesn't prove a lot for an invite spot. You have NP, Newbie, Danish Bears, Singularity, Digital Chaos, which again was a replacement team, Fnatic, Warriors Gaming Unity, and Invictus Gaming. So there's a couple of really solid teams in there, but when you really break it down, only 3 of these 8 teams were even at the Kiev Major. So they're 5th on the list. I don't think there's really much more explanation needed for that. And then actually one behind that is this Galaxy Battles. This Galaxy Battles was actually just very recently announced right here. It's going to be a $150,000 LAN. Now, I'm looking at, you see, actually I put this ahead of Zodak. I don't know why I put them below Zodak. The only reason I put them below, I guess, was because this was like just announced and it's kind of last minute almost. And it is going to be happening at the same time as the Summit 7. So that kind of does split up the competition a little bit as far as the significance of competitors in the event. So, but honestly, with their invite list, we got Newbie, IG Vitality, TNC, and Thunderbirds. Those are 4 very good teams right there. And they are running their qualifiers right now for both China and Southeast Asia. There is going to be a North American qualifier as well as a European qualifier. So I actually think Galaxy Battles would be ahead of Zodak, but if anything, they're bottom 2 together, right? Like I don't think these events are going to be ones that you take really much from outside of, okay, you won your share of the money congratulations. So pretty much no impact as far as TI invite spot for these events. So there you go. Those are my rankings. Again, we have 6 LANs. One that already happened at Starladder, one that's currently happening in Manila, Epicenter coming up, Summit 7, Zodak, and Galaxy Battles. We got some good Dota 2 happening, guys. Definitely looking forward to all of that. So, all right, do you guys agree? Well, I assume so. I'm usually right. Moving forward here, a couple more things to go over now before we're getting towards the end of the show. But one thing I did happen to watch over, I actually had caught up with it on Monday, I want to say. I watched the True Side episode, the most recent True Side episode with OG versus Virtus Pro at the Kiev Major Grand Finals. I love these, man. Like, we really should be appreciating what Valve is doing when it comes to these True Side episodes, especially. They do such a fantastic job at really showing what it's like to be a player behind the scenes and how maybe it's not as glamorous as one may think. I mean, you look at those break rooms that they're in, or, you know, in the case of Virtus Pro, just kind of just going outside, just smoking outside or whatever in between games. It's not like these players are living like these rock star lives necessarily, even when they're competing for all this money that's on the line. In the case of the Kiev Major, right, there was a $3 million prize pool, $1 million for first place. But I also really like the idea of, we got it, especially the Game 5, where they really broke it down. They basically gave us the draft analysis of both teams and the back and forth, and you could just tell the process, what it takes, and how they were calling each other's picks to an extent, calling each other's bans, and it was fascinating to watch. And it really, we are spoiled when it comes to having content like this, but big shout out to Valve for doing this stuff, and really hope it does continue, because it's so awesome to kind of get this perspective on these teams. But one more thing about it that I definitely picked up, and I know others did as well. You could also tell the emotions of the teams was definitely different, where Virtus Pro, a team that probably felt a lot of pressure. Again, they in a sense were the home team. They were playing for their home fans. They were playing against the defending major champions, the 3-time major champions at that point in OG. And you could tell their demeanor, it was very aggressive. It was very almost yelling at each other, being frustrated with each other throughout the games, throughout the drafting, whatever it was, in between the games especially. On the side of OG, however, it was much more passive. I mean, I'm not to say that they weren't getting emotional or getting, you know, passionate about it, but especially with the situation with Ana, I think it was after game 2 that they had lost, or maybe it was even after game 3 that they lost. Ana playing the Storm Spirit, he was very down. He was definitely kicking himself, basically saying that he played horrible, whatever. He kept getting caught. But both Fly and No-Tail were just, you know, they're like, just let it go, man. You know, we're having fun. Just have fun. That's all you could do. And they were joking about it. And we're talking about very, very experienced players trying to, you know, pick up a guy that is obviously lacking the experience that they have. And just that attitude of just stay positive. It clearly had an impact in terms of the following games there. The last 2 games that OG, of course, ended up winning, and thus taking the series in the end. And you could just tell the demeanor in Ana especially definitely changed. It was fantastic to watch. It was a really great episode. So if you missed it, by the way, I highly recommend checking it out. It's about 35 minutes or something like that, but it's basically of the grand finals of the Kiev Major, and just gives a breakdown, or gives you a behind the scenes perspective of what the teams were doing there. So again, big shout out to Valve for that. All right, that takes us, though, to the competitive surge, guys. Going to finish things off here, going over some overall results and news that's been happening. So we'll start up top. The Dream League European region actually officially wrapped up earlier in the week. So we have our 3 teams from there. We have Secret, Liquid, and Vega Squadron. Actually, the 3 teams that qualified. Yes, that's right. Virtus Pro actually came up short in the end. They finished in the 4th place spot, but Vega Squadron taking 3rd place with a 9-5 record. Liquid also 9-5, and then Secret 10-4. Again, they're going to be joined by the American qualifier at DreamHack Atlanta, set to take place in July there. So, looking forward to that one. We got Galaxy Battle announced. I talked a little bit about that already, but the $150,000 LAN that's going to be happening in China during the Summit 7 event, actually. Again, Newbie, IGV, TNC, and Thunderbirds were the invite teams. The China and Southeast Asian qualifiers have already begun. Another event going on, the Loop Bet Invitational for Summit 7. Speaking of that, this is actually the final chance to qualify for the Summit 7. There's still 8 teams as I'm recording this eligible, but some of the more top dogs, no doubt. Mouse Sports, Alliance, NIP, Pro Dota, Empire, Vega Squadron, Gamba Esports in effect. I just listed out all late, actually. So there you go. That's by the end of this week, I believe we should be finding out the final team for Summit 7. The B Invitational, it's a $10,000 tournament online event that's going on for the American region. Currently taking place, and actually we got our grand final set up. It's Complexity versus Team Freedom, and the new Complexity team versus Freedom. Now, Freedom actually beat Complexity in the winners final 2-0. So this will be a best of 5 grand finals, and actually takes place later today. So by the time you're listening to this podcast, the result may very likely be there. You can check it out for yourself, but let's go Complexity, just saying. Then the Russian Esports Cup is an event. Frankly, it's kind of hard to really get information on this event, but it seems like it's just like an online event, but it's a $55,000 prize pool, actually. Mainly just for the CIS region, though, and there's down to 4 teams. It's been a long event. We got Empire versus Elements Pro, and then Virtus Pro versus Team Spirit is the final 4, and they're going to be playing in their mini double elimination bracket there. Or actually, it's not double elimination, excuse me. It's a third place match if you lose that first round there, so there you go. That's it for the competitive Surge, though. Other stuff that's going on in competitive Dota 2. But, ladies and gentlemen, I think that's a good spot to wrap things up on here with the DotPro with BreakyCPK. So, hopefully, you guys enjoyed it once again. Big shout out to my guests, Dakota, TrentPax, and Cinderin. All did a great job here. And I really appreciate you guys tuning in. I've been having a lot of fun doing this podcast, and it seems like the reception's been great so far. I'm always willing for feedback, guys. I've made some adjustments over the shows, as hopefully you can tell. And been having a lot of fun with it. So, again, a really big shout out to you guys for listening, and hopefully many, many more of these episodes to come. So we'll see you guys next week. Enjoy the rest of your week. Enjoy the Manilla Masters, guys. Have a good night.